All right, welcome. We'll get right into it, talking about India, China, and Southwest Asia here up to about the year 1800, or the dawn, the cusp, you might say, of the 19th century. Um, we will look at India as far as its the late Mughal Empire, and its cultural growth and enrichment, the developments taking place within that empire during this period of time. We'll look also at its leadership, specifically the reign of Aurangzeb and his kind of militant focus as far as his administration was concerned. We'll also be getting into aspects of this increasingly um, meddlesome injection of European influence within the subcontinent as well. Specifically, the consolidation of European authority in the hands of the British and the increasing global reach of the British Empire itself. With regard to China, we'll take a look again, continue the investigation that we've scoped out thus far with the Qing dynasty and the imperial rule in the 17th and 18th century. What's interesting with regard to China during this period of time is that you have a very kind of Jekyll and Hyde type of uh, um, characteristics, in which you have some of the most prolonged reigns in the history of imperial China under the Qing dynasty during this period of time, where this would encourage things like, kind of cultural growth, affluence, times of progress, stability, and then also closely kind of bookending or dovetailing areas, these prolonged periods of peace and prosperity. You have eras of instability, insurrection primarily, within the Chinese imperial state itself. And so we'll take a look at that to get a better understanding of those dynamics and the aspects. Turning then to Southwest Asia, we'll examine the slow but steady decline of the two key empires here, the Safavid Empire, which would begin its process of collapse at the hands of not only the Ottoman Turks and the Ottoman Empire on its western flank, but also increasing incursions coming from the Afghan portions of Central Asia itself. And within the Southwest Asia, Southeast Europe is the Ottoman Empire, kind of straddling that zone. They too begin to suffer at the hands of uh, external pressures being brought about as a result of the Ottomans' interaction with European powers, primarily the Habsburgs, the Russians, the French, and the British. But also, interestingly, the Ottoman Empire begins to suffer internal stratification as well. If you recall, in talking about the Ottoman Empire earlier, we had kind of sketched out how it was a multicultural state. Well, what happens is that um, that multiculturalism begins to um, stretch and kind of erode the internal workings of the imperial state of the Ottomans from within. And so, because of this outward pressure and inward kind of stratification, it's going to lead to the Ottoman state essentially collapsing. Now, that wouldn't happen officially until World War One in the 20th century, when it would literally cease to exist. But even as early as the 19th century, mid 19th century, as we'll see in future lectures, it was often referred to as the sick man of Europe because it was not doing well as a functioning state. So this is what we plan to kind of cover in this lecture and begin to kind of sketch those themes out here. So within the late Mughal Empire of India, um, we turned attention towards Jalad-ud-Din Akbar, who, as you can see, ruled from or existed from 1556 to 1605. He was noteworthy because he was able to consolidate control over the northern portions of what is today India. And in essence, he is going to, in many respects, exhibit more absolute characteristics of rule, imperial rule. He's going to have all lands restored to the emperor himself. And he's also going to institute what becomes known as the Mansabdari system, a reorganization of the imperial bureaucracy itself within the late Mughal Empire, so that it would have within the bureaucracy, a hierarchy of civil military officials, so that this would be a dual role where provincial governors, in essence, would wear not only a governing civil service kind type of cap, but also a serve as the source of the military authority within those given districts and provinces as well. There would also be within the Mansabdari system, a revamping of the tax code and the tax system within the Mughal Empire itself. This would bring it more up to date. It would become more efficient, more robust as far as filling the coffers of the treasury of Akbar's Mughal Empire. This was so efficient that there was the branding of horses in government service in order to prevent fraud. So it was very meticulous in its approach as far as how far-reaching the uh, uh, the imperial presence would be felt specifically within, and applied to the instituting of a tax code, but then also um, uh, the exacting, the collecting of those taxes. His son, uh, Nur Uddin Jahangir, uh, reaped the benefits of his father's accomplishments and the very, again, efficient, almost revamped administrative abilities of the Mughal state under Akbar. Well, it's Jahangir that's going to be able to kind of, um, the father does the legwork and the son reaps the benefits in this case. So the reorganization of the Mughal state was going to allow for greater attention to be paid to non-state affairs. So Jahangir, who was not necessarily concerned with or interested in administering day-to-day affairs of the state itself within the Mughal Empire, instead he was more focused on and interested in developing the cultural characteristics and aspects of the empire itself. He was able to maintain his father's empire to a large degree. In fact, he turned over much of the day-to-day governing and the responsibilities embedded within uh, over to his wife. So that he could pursue again these kind of more cultural, in his case, more in his belief, more meaningful kinds of pursuits. Shah Jahan, the son of Jahangir, continued with the development of cultural characteristics and pursuits within the late Mughal Empire. In 1632, or from 1632 to 1653, he would order and oversee the construction of the Taj Mahal, which was a tomb dedicated to his late wife. It's considered to be one of the most beautiful, architectural structures in the world. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site today. Of course, it's a place that you can visit. If ever you are on, vacation or touring the Indian subcontinent. Uh, it's also roughly around this period of time, or I should say, under roughly during the early to mid portions of the 17th century, roughly around Shah Jahan's term or period of reign, but also under the leadership of Aurangzeb as well, that there's going to be an increasing presence of European power, European temptation, I guess, or influence being exerted or at least installed is probably the best term within the Indian subcontinent here as well. Just to deviate just for a moment to talk about this and flesh it out just a little bit, we'll get more into it in a few minutes. But in the year 1600, the British were successful in forming what comes to be known as the British East India Company. Again, this was much like the Dutch East India Company that we talked about in an earlier lecture. The British also are beginning to move in that direction. And again, these are direct expressions of mercantilist trade policy and economic philosophy. Okay, this close association, a close alignment between the state and commercial interests. In 1612, in the subcontinent of India itself, the English advanced their interests by defeating the Portuguese in that year, and in essence, beginning to evict one of the earliest established European powers to open up trade with India, if you recall from the first week's lecture. The English at the same time don't do much in the way of building a rapport with the Mughal leadership that existed during that period of time. Again, this is roughly under the reign of Jahangir. Fast forward through Jahan's reign to Aurangzeb. Um, Aurangzeb was going to bring about military success for the Mughal emperors. He rebelled as Shah Jahan's health declined. Sensing an opportunity to seize power for himself, he decides to pounce, and he seized the imperial throne by force. And in 1669, he begins to take much more of a draconian type of tact when it came to overseeing and administering to the various kind of cultural subgroups within the Mughal empire itself. Specifically, he began to prohibit the open expression of Hindu religion. He oversaw or ordered the destruction of Hindu temples, and as a result, this led to the tragic loss of numerous pieces of Indian art and cultural treasures. Because of this more repressive type of aspect that Aurangzeb is beginning to put into effect, this is going to lead to a host of unrest or a growing climate of unrest within the empire. You have Hindu uprisings, as you might expect from being repressed. There was also restlessness that began to percolate and boil over along the northern fringe of the Mughal state as it butted up against the Afghan tribes located on the frontier of that part of the empire itself. And there were also militant Sikh religious leaders that also began to crop up within the Mughal state as well, as the level of intolerance began to grow as a result of Aurangzeb's policies. In 1707, Aurangzeb died, and the empire begins to disintegrate. Um, Again, when you have autocratic control, and that autocrat dies, typically this is going to lead to an increased period or an increased likelihood of a period of instability, and that's exactly what happens in the Mughal experience in the early 18th century. And as a result, local leaders kind of those more provincial types of officers and officers begin to take control. They begin to oversee the kind of more, they exert more independence with the vacuum of power that had occurred with Rangzib's death at the you know, heart of the imperial throne and imperial authority itself. Anytime there's a vacuum of power like that, the Europeans were in pretty good position more often than not during this period of time and throughout the height of the imperial era of Europe and the creation of their global empires. They were in prime position to take advantage of areas of any type of turmoil or any type of, again, political vacuum. And the English did this in during this period of time. In 1717, the British East India Company won concessions from the Mughal Empire uh, that, in essence, they were able to assert themselves without any real type of interference in places like Calcutta. Not only in Calcutta, but the entire province uh, that that city oversaw or administered to. They were exempt in these areas of Calcutta and the surrounding province. The British East India Company was exempt from any types of custom duties that would be levied on any type of trade, to be collected by Mughal authorities. And this was oftentimes allowed, permitted by the Mughal Empire and their authorities, their state representatives, or I should say, their state kind of um, officers, largely as a result of uh, the British East India Company um, offering gifts and even medical services to members of the governing bureaucracy and their families, or even to the imperial family itself, or the provincial governor families. As England's fortunes rose throughout the 18th century, it begins to consolidate increasing amounts of control over the Indian subcontinent as a whole. By 1757, the British and British officers began to conspire with Hindu bankers and a military leader by the name of Mir Jafar, who was uh, an accomplished military official. In 1757, he was victorious at the Battle of Plassey, um, which was able to take back Calcutta and the Bengal region. So here, uh, the British are beginning to work with disaffected groups within the Indian, or I should say, within the Mughal Empire, and play these internal tensions off against one another in order to, again, assume more dominant control for themselves in their own right. And that was, again, classic example of the techniques and the strategies that Europeans used in order to create these sprawling, almost limitless global empires for themselves. By 1759, the British had succeeded in ousting the Dutch from the subcontinent as well. And as a result of things like the Treaty of Paris of 1763, the same Treaty of Paris that ended the French and Indian War in the American colonies between the British and the French, this terms of the same treaty uh, made it so that the French relinquished control of its colonial possessions within the Indian subcontinent as well. Another step, another piece that the British were able to use, and a concession that they were able to win in order to, again, to turn the Indian subcontinent into the crown jewel of their global empire. In the 1770s and 1780s, the British managed to defeat Indian challenges in the First and Second Maharatha Wars. And as a result of that consolidation that took place, by 1784, British Prime Minister William Pitt successfully enacted what's known as the India Act, in which the British government and the monarchy itself forbade the British East India Company from interfering in domestic Indian affairs, which was interesting because it is, in essence, to check um, the territorial expansion of this private interested company. So, and this was something of an Achilles heel with regard to um, the economic philosophy of mercantilism itself. Again, just to flesh this out for you a bit. So the British East India Company was not really it was a political entity, but its chief concern was economics, and it wanted to exploit to the greatest degree possible the economic wealth within the Indian subcontinent. And it was willing to play, games as far as again exploiting internal divisions in order to get at and create commercial treaties that would highlight this exploitation to the fullest. But from the British government's perspective, these efforts meant that it was going to be the British government that acted as the safeguard, as the governing authority. And by the 1780s, by the time the India Act is proposed and put into effect, the British government is really saying, look, we can't have this, we can't have public policy driven and dictated by this private company, the British East India Company. It's not in the government's interest. They get they reap all the rewards from putting from making these haphazard kinds of treaties and beginning to expand commercial influence, but it's left up to the British government to see to the actual administration and the protection of those commercial interests. And that is something that by 1784, the British government was not willing to do and no longer willing to tolerate. And note the year here, 1784. The ideas of Adam Smith have been circulating for about a decade. He published his Wealth of Nations in 1776. This set a new standard with regard to economic philosophy. This idea of the classical or laissez-faire type of principle that government should get out of, um, commercial or economic matters. And so, in many respects, you could argue that William Pitt, the British Prime Minister, and his government is going to that enacts the India Act itself is operating from that mentality, that kind of more Adam Smith kind of perspective. It also forbade the East India Company from interfering in domestic affairs of India itself. So again, that this was not going to be tolerated. By 1786 to 1793, Lord Cornwallis takes control in India. He serves as the governor general and the commander in chief. So he's wearing both kind of the political and the military hat when it comes to authority. It gives him a wide ranging mandate as far as his authority is concerned. He gets to run the subcontinent, or where the British are in control within India itself. He gets to call the shots as far as policy and or kind of military commitments. He reorganized the administrative offices of within his purview of the governing and executing authority within the Indian state itself. And it should be noted, this is the same Lord Cornwallis who had just been defeated Battle of Yorktown in during the American Revolution. So 3 years on, and he is reassigned to take over um, the governing affairs of India. In 1793, he enacts what's called Cornwallis's Code. This is a judicial system that was recast the judicial system of the Indian state on the British model. And also, it made it so that Indians were excluded from all higher posts of government. So here we have British by towards the close of the 18th century, coming to govern in virtually every way, shape, and form throughout the entirety of the Indian subcontinent, by and large. That it's the British government that is the government in India by this time, and through the institution of things like Cornwallis's Code. Just checking on time real quick. Okay, we got a little bit more, so. What I'll do is well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop things here. This is a pretty good break. When I come back, we'll talk about the developments taking place in China and the Qing Dynasty. So stay tuned.